So without further ado, please help me give a warm welcome to Miss Mary Laschinger.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, good, my speaker's on. Well, listen, I do have some things to share with you, but the fact of the matter is we can talk about anything you would like to talk about. What I did think I'd start with is just share a little bit about the history of Veritiv, because especially those who are in the business venue here at the education standpoint, you might find it interesting because I believe at some point in time what we have done as a company will be written up at some point as quite an interesting process and journey that the company has taken. Veritiv is a well-unknown Fortune 500 company. And the reason I say that is because we've only been in existence since 2014, July of 2014. As mentioned, we are I guess the general way to think about it, a distribution company and provide total solutions to our customers. So for example, in our packaging business, we work with customers in a broad array of industries, everything from electronics to the automotive industry. And they will provide us products that they want to package, whether it's shelf-ready package or secondary packaging. We will design the package for them, both graphically, structurally. We will source all of those materials for them and deliver those materials to the point where they put the products in the boxes. And so we like to think of ourselves as a total solution. And then we also provide the supply chain capabilities along that value chain. We became Veritiv, as I said, in July of 2014 as a result of a spin of a company owned by International Paper called xpedx. And at that time, I was a senior vice president of International Paper and the president of that part of our company. We spun xpedx out of International Paper. We merged with our largest competitor, and so we now were number one and number two. And that competitor was owned by private equity. So we spun, we merged, we did an IPO, and we went public on the New York Stock Exchange all in one day. And it was quite a journey and quite a fascinating process because neither company had any public company infrastructure. And so within the first few months, we had to put in place things like SEC financial reporting. We had to begin to become SOX compliant. We had to build an organization structure and fill all of the jobs in the company. We had to stand up a board of directors, and generate a shareholder base. So it was a fascinating time for us. And as I thought about our journey as a company, we needed the first few months, first 6 to 12, to stabilize the company and build the public company infrastructure. Then very quickly move into integration and capture synergies. And we're about 2/3 of the way through that. And then we've also started the third part of our journey, which is to accelerate growth in the company. And in fact, we completed our first acquisition in the third quarter of this year. As I mentioned, I was a senior vice president of International Paper at the time we became Veritiv, and I made the decision to become the chairman and CEO of Veritiv. And I did not have what I would consider the typical path to become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And so I thought what I would do is, given where you are in your careers, is to share with you some perspective of what some of those challenges might look like and how to think about your journey and how to achieve your full potential. I grew up, as mentioned, on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. I didn't even know what business really was. And so every day I wonder, how did I get to where I am? And frankly, I didn't even have the self-confidence to go to college right out of high school, and I didn't start my 4-year degree until the age of 21. And so I was considered probably an old student by the time I graduated. And another element that I'd like to put in front of you too is I was an average student. I did get A's eventually, but I wasn't the smartest person by any stretch or any imagination. And so there were other attributes that allowed me to get to where I am that I think are very important also for you to understand. So one of the things I will share with you today, as you think about where you are, and some of you are getting ready to graduate, some of you will in the next year or two, what I'd like you to think about, as you think about your potential, I would suggest to you it's not probably what you think it is today. In fact, I would suggest that you can't even imagine what your full potential is. And the reason you can't imagine that today is because along your journey, you will have to make choices. And the decisions that you make with those choices will guide you, and those choices will lead you to various paths and other choices along the way. So one of the things that I think is really important for you to think about as you begin your career is it's very important to understand what your goals are. Now, I know you're told that on a regular basis, but I'd like you to think about them in a much broader way. For example, I only had 2 overarching goals when I embarked on building my career. Those were that I would be able to take care of myself, as simple as that is, and I wouldn't be bored. And that aspect of not being bored meant that I needed to have opportunities to constantly learn and grow. And so those were my 2 overarching goals. And one of the other things that I learned over time is make sure that they are your goals, not something that someone else wants for you. And very important, don't let people tell you what you can't do. And I think that's critically important as you think about your future. So figure out what your goals are and make sure that your personal and professional goals are not in conflict. And what I mean by that is, and I'll use my example, is that I grew up in the state of Wisconsin in a very rural environment. It was not important for me to stay in the Midwest. It also wasn't important for me to stay physically close to my family. And by making those choices on a personal basis, it provided me flexibility in terms of the choices that I would make in my future. So understanding both your personal and professional goals is very, very important because it does lead you to the types of choices that you will make. And there is no one path to success. And the choices that you make along your journey will determine the level of success that you have. And I will also add here is that for women, making those choices is even more difficult because you have more and other choices that you have to make around family and other matters. But for all of you, you will be faced with making choices. And think about your choices as they either create opportunities for you or they diminish your opportunities. For example, the first choice I had to make upon graduation was whether I was willing to pick up and move to 30 miles outside of New York City. This was a big decision. I was leaving my family, my friends, everything I had known. But had I not done that, I would never have expanded my opportunities. I went to work for a large Fortune 500 company, and that experience gave me a completely different perspective than staying in a smaller community or working for a smaller company. Most importantly, there isn't a right or wrong decision. It's a decision that's right for you. And this decision was consistent with my goals. Over the course of time, I've been faced with many choices that I've had to make, and some of them more difficult than others. At one point in time, I had just 24 hours to decide if I was willing to pick up and move to Europe. I was meeting with the CEO of International Paper at the time, and he says, "Mary, we have your next opportunity for you, and it's in Europe." And I said, "Doing what?" And he said, "Running all of our Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and Russian operations." And I said, "Well, what if I decide it's not the right thing for me at this time? After all, I had just moved twice in the last 18 months. And he said to me, "Well, we'll go to plan B." And I said, "Well, what is plan B?" And he said, "It's plan A." So I was living in Europe within 2 weeks. But I can tell you, had I not made that choice or that personal sacrifice, I would not be leading a large public company today. Because it was those experiences that developed me and allowed me the opportunity to grow in a way that was quite remarkable as I reflect on it. Because those opportunities gave me opportunities ranging from being able to negotiate a joint venture in Russia, to fixing operations throughout various countries, learning how to operate and live in a foreign country. Sometimes choices require great courage, they require you to take risks, and may require personal sacrifice. So know your goals and be prepared to make choices. The next piece of advice I have for you in achieving your full potential is to keep learning. You might think that you're leaving at some point in time in the future an educational institution, and maybe your learning is going to stop. But I would suggest to you it is just the beginning. In order for you to achieve your full potential, you need to grow and develop, and you need to keep learning. And the learning will come in many, many different ways, whether it's a new job or whether it's a change in geography where you live, whether it's doing something different that you've never done, is something as simple as traveling. And importantly, learning comes from listening to others and taking feedback. There were many times in my career where I made choices on just to learn. I took assignments that were not promotions or were not more money, and I took them just to broaden my experience base. And learning never stops. When I took this job as a CEO, guess what? I'd never been a CEO before. And so I had to learn. And it was critical to my and our company's success that I continued to learn. Oftentimes people think that people like me who are CEOs of the company, we have all the answers, but the fact is we don't. We will make mistakes. And I then have to listen to my team and learn from them. And by that way, and when I do that, I will and do become a better leader for them and for our company. And they're teaching me things each and every day. Receiving feedback from others, you should think about as a gift. I've received many gifts in my career, and they've been very, very valuable to me. And you need to recognize that other people will know more than you at certain points in time. And again, I learn something new each and every day. And some of the most difficult and frustrating assignments that I've had provided me with the greatest learnings. So listening and learning will provide you with a different perspective. And the reason that's important, having a different perspective and developing different perspectives, is because it opens up your mind to new ideas and new ways to think. It will develop your skills in a way that will expand your capabilities. And the reason that's so important is because our world is changing so rapidly right in front of us. Your ability to adapt to change will be critical to your success. So again, never stop learning. I often get asked, if you achieve your full potential, does that mean you're happy, and does that mean you're successful? And my view of success and my definition of success over time has changed. I'd suggest to you that you should figure out what your definition of success is. I used to think that success was determined by the amount of money you made or the job title you had, how many people you led. And over time, I've concluded that success is defined by your happiness and how fulfilled you are in what you're doing. I believe happiness and fulfillment depends on two things. First of all, it's finding your passion. And secondly, it's making people the center of your success. I absolutely believe to be successful and to be happy, you need to find your passion. What that means to me is, what is that thing that drives you each and every day? What is that thing that motivates you to want to get up every morning and make a difference? What is the thing that gives you your purpose in life? And if you can figure that out, you will be happy doing what you do each and every day. I learned very early on that my passion was to drive change in the business environment, resulting in improvements. And what that meant to me is that I left things stronger than when I took them on. It may be a stronger, more productive business where people thrive and have great jobs and careers, and people make good money and thrive. Or it may simply be developing a stronger leadership team. But that's what I learned as my passion, and so I suggest find your passion, and it will make your life more rewarding and exciting. I also believe that to achieve fulfillment, you need to make people a part of your life and your life decisions. And some of the things that I've realized around this have been significant over the course of time, in particular how you define leadership. Early on in my career, I used to think about leadership was all about me. Over the course of time and my experiences, I've learned from other people, like the young woman who was on the shop floor one day, and I'm the general manager now of this business, and she comes up to me and she says, "Mary, am I going to be able to make my house payment next month?" That's a daunting responsibility, and what I realized is she is looking to me to make the right decisions for the right reasons for the company so that she continues to have a job and can take care of her family. It's when you realize that leadership is not about you, it's about the people around you and how successful you can make them. And I think you'll find early on in your career, you won't do anything alone. You need people to help you succeed. So, my advice is, again, know your goals, both your personal and professional. Make choices and recognize they either create opportunities for you or diminish those opportunities. Keep learning, which will enable you to grow and develop. Find your passion, which will lead you to happiness and fulfillment, and make people the center of your success. And so with that, I'm going to stop and open it up to questions.
Yeah, Mary, you had a unique opportunity in terms of starting a company, not necessarily from scratch, but a new company. And I'm wondering what the role of vision and values and culture. Did you try to just transplant international papers, or did you want to create something unique for your company? And how did you go about the process of doing that?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, there's an absolute known statistic out there with mergers. 50% of them fail for lack of alignment of values and culture. So, we recognize that, and the fact of the matter is both cultures were not what I wanted our culture to be. And I also thought that was important because we were bringing two competitors together. And so we did everything from picked a new name to a new color so that people could begin to identify with Veritiv, not the companies that they historically had been a part of. We rolled out our values in the very first week of operation. We had still have six core values, and we speak about them in almost everything we do to try and get people to understand what they mean, because it's the basis for building our culture. To build a culture, you need to base it on values, and then you need processes and management systems to support that. So I'll use for an example, we have a value around people. Our value around people is that we want people engaged in the success of the company. We are going to drive performance management to become a high-performing company, and we're going to support talent development to develop our people. So what does that mean to employees, and how do you bring that to life? Well, in our first 6 months, we made every employee develop 3 objectives. Okay, why is that important? They need to know what they're doing to contribute to the company. After the first 6 months, we rolled out an entire platform, both systems enabled and process enabled, to manage performance. That starts with objectives, performance ratings, and helping people understand what we expect of them around their core values as well as their work output. And then a year and a half into our being as Veritiv, we also then rolled out the tools that we use, which is to develop our people, which are competency-based tools. And so that's an example of what we're doing to build our culture, our value around people, and the tools and things that we're putting in place to support building that culture that we're looking for. So it's actually a structured process to be developing a culture. It's based on values and processes and tools, and it's something that you've got to stand up and defend and relentlessly focus on each and every day. And I got to tell you, it has not been easy. We had people that decided that they didn't want to be a part of the organization and they left right away. We had people that wanted to be a part of the organization but didn't make it and then chose to either opt out or they had to leave. And I'll share a perspective with you on that. For example, I had a senior leader talk to me one day, and he says, "Will I never get ahead at Veritiv because I came from this company?" And I said, "No, you're never going to get ahead at Veritiv because you behave badly." Yeah, but if we as leaders don't hold people accountable for behaviors, results matter, but how you get results are equally important. And that's how you build a culture. So we've gone through exiting a lot of people up front when we brought the organization together. Then we went through another phase of people deciding whether they wanted to be a part of the culture. And now we're in a phase where there's still people trying to figure that out as well as we continue to grow and develop as a company. But I would say culture building is probably one of the hardest things to do. Other questions? This one back here.
So you spoke a lot about continually learning. Do you feel that you've learned the most from an education that you chose or something that may have happened to you along the way? And if so, what was it?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I started out my college thinking I was going to be in IT, and I very quickly concluded that was a mistake. And to this day, I'm technologically challenged. I think to answer your question, I ended up going into business because it was more suited for who I am as an individual. There is no doubt in my mind that what the education process, it gives you a foundation. A foundation on how to think and how to learn, and hopefully a foundation on how to interact with people and teams as well. And that foundation is just the beginning of your learning. And so I look at education as giving you a foundation by which you hope you've got some skills, in particular around thinking, and you use that to learn as you go into the job environment. And then your learning, frankly, accelerates after that because you're exposed to so many different things. But the other thing to note and why it accelerates, you hope you're doing something that you really enjoy, right? I mean, had I gone into IT after I graduated from college, it would have been a disaster and I would not have accelerated. That goes back to finding your passion. And to the extent that you can take your education and use that as a basis, and finding your passion, you will accelerate in what you choose to do.
Thank you for the talk. You spoke a lot about personal sacrifice and making the decision to leave home and go far away from family in order to have more opportunities. Mm-hmm. But I know many people end up happier if they choose not to make some of those sacrifices. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you found the right balance between some of the personal sacrifice and pursuing the opportunities, and any advice you have in that front.
Yeah, I think finding what we call at work, we call it work-life balance. So your language is very familiar. You know what? It's probably one of the most difficult things to do. And first and foremost, I'd never recommend to everyone to do what I did. You've got to decide what's right for you and for your family, and there is no one right answer. What I would suggest to you is that I believe those choices will change depending on where you are in your life's journey, right? There are times when people, they can't, and we have this in our company as well, where we want someone to take a move to develop them into another role, but it's just not the right time because maybe they've got a kid that's in high school and maybe they want to stay where they are for another year. And I use that as an example because those choices will change based on where you are in the rest of your life. And so my advice to you is just to think about where you are and where you want to be and what choices can you make at any given time, because once you make it once doesn't mean it's a lifetime choice, right? You can choose maybe to stay close to family early on and decide later, well, you know what? The family situation has changed, or whatever that might be. So my advice to you really is to not make it one choice a life choice and to recognize that your life will change over time, and your views on that will probably change over time as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for the talk. So when you talked about kind of going from IT into business, how did you kind of rebrand yourself in order to get more jobs correlating to what you wanted to do rather than what you were quote unquote educated for? Well,
so I left IT after my first year of college. That was a pretty easy decision for me. So your question is maybe I could answer your question around, I had a general management degree. I didn't have a finance degree or a marketing degree. It was more of a general management. And so how do you take a degree like that is quite generic and get into a field? And because I ended up in the supply chain field, but the university I went to did not have a supply chain offering. And it probably wouldn't have mattered if they did, because when I got into college, I had no idea what supply chain was. And so what I did to try and figure that out is I started getting involved in my junior and senior year in associations that were connected to that discipline. And actually, there's an organization, it's called APEX at the time, American Production Inventory Control Society. I think it's called something else today. I'm not sure. But I actually joined that organization to build greater knowledge and understanding and networking through that. So I actually made a decision to become certified in something before I ever left school. And that gave me an opportunity with a large company that said, okay, this person is serious about supply chain, so let's pursue this individual. We're here.
Thank you. We're actually one of our primary vendors. We're my family and I own a small consumer packaged good company. We're pretty highly reliant on the retail channel. So I was going to get your take on how you view retail. It looks like it's in several pictures. I saw a picture of a Macy's today in Canada, and it looked like a bomb went off, or that may not be a good term, but it looked like it was imploding. So what is your take on the future of retail, say, for the next 10 years?
Oh, wow. I believe that our world and the way consumers, and this audience probably more than anyone realizes this, the way consumers are making decisions to buy is changing very, very rapidly. And I think that's going to have profound impacts on manufacturing and companies over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. So let me start there. In the space of retail, I think I can't predict where they're going to go, but something in the public news, Toys R Us, is in, I don't think they've actually filed for bankruptcy, but that's an example of something public that's out there that has been announced. And why did that happen? And it's because they didn't understand the trends that were occurring, that were impacting their business fast enough, and couldn't develop the technology fast enough to meet the customer needs. And so I think that it's not just retail that's going to be impacting. I think there could be profound impacts across a number of industries, a number of, whether it's supply functions, whether it's supply chain, whether it's industries, that are going to go through material change because of the way consumers are changing and the way they want to interact. I tend to think that everything is going to become more and more specialized. I even look at our business today, if you think about packaging, And I'm excited about our future in packaging. But it used to be 10 years ago, when you sold packaging, you'd sell a brown box to a manufacturer who would put 20 items or 30 items in that brown box and then ship it to a store, right? And then they'd unpack it and put it on the shelf. Well, today, there's even businesses out there today that are doing packaging on demand. And they're designing products, and they literally go out and get a package on demand for that one item so they can ship it to that consumer. So I think things are changing very rapidly. What I'm not sure of and fully understand is how do people make money in this game? Because there are costs associated with that. Today, consumers, frankly, are not paying for all those costs. Margins are being squeezed by whether it's the manufacturers or the retailers. And at some point, I wonder how all of this comes together where businesses can continue to support these kinds of things and make enough money to pay people and stay in business. So I don't have the direct answer on retail. What I think is changing is rapidly, and business models, I suspect, will be rethought over and over and over again over the next 10 years.
Hi, thank you again for your message. Given that there are so few CEO women in Fortune 500 companies, do you feel a special responsibility to groom women to get to the point that you are? And if so, what is it that you're doing to make that happen?
Yeah. So as you can imagine, I get this question a lot about diversity and being a female in the role I'm in. And so first and foremost, I would like you to think about diversity and how you yourself should think about diversity as not to think about what you are, but to think about who you are. And what I mean by that is don't make it about you being a woman. Make it about what you can do and the impact that you can have. And have the confidence, not the arrogance, to make it about you and your capabilities and the impact that you can have versus about making it about you being a woman. Now that may be a hard message, but that's reality. And so I think more and more we need to think about diversity and creating environments where people feel comfortable enough to show what they're capable of doing. And so my view of diversity is just that, is creating an environment where people feel comfortable enough to excel and be themselves. You ask, what do I do specifically? I mentor a lot of individuals, but they're not just women. It's a lot of individuals across the organization to help them grow and develop. And other things that I do is events. This morning I was at an event that was a women's forum talking about leadership. And so there's a number of things that I can do around mentoring, which I do, sponsoring people, and even doing events like this, or the one I did this morning. Now don't think that all I do as a CEO is go around on the speaker circuit. I barely have enough time. In fact, I was embarrassed to say that I had canceled this event 3 times because of things coming up, so I apologize for that. So yes, I do feel some responsibility for that, but I also would like, the message I have is to broaden your thinking on how you think about diversity in general. It's about diversity of thought and about what you can bring based on your skills and capabilities.
I want to know what kind of sustainability or environmental impact measures you take in a company.
That we take. So sustainability and environmental impact. So we do, we offer sustainable and renewable products in our product line. We give customers choices if they want something that's more sustainable and or renewable. And so we do have a product offering in each of our categories that is could be any combination of recyclable, broader based, sustainable, and in some cases renewable. So we offer it in our product lines as well. In our operations, we have facilities that are LEED certified, for example. We do simple things that make a big difference. In all of our warehouses, for example, we have lights that come on when you walk down the aisle instead of on all the time. And so there's ways, and we have responsibilities around measuring how much energy are we using, and are we more energy efficient. So we try to manage sustainability both in our own operations, being more environmentally sensitive, as well as the products that we offer our customers. What's interesting, and something you should ask yourselves when it comes to products and sustainability, most often the consumer doesn't want to pay for it. You probably didn't know that. So if you've got a product, unfortunately, offering sustainable, environmentally sound products often costs more to make. And if you've got it too often, consumers, if they've got this product that costs a little bit more, that's more sustainable, and those that aren't, not everyone, but a lot of people will not choose to pay more. So that's a balance with companies that they have to make. So.
Hi, thank you for coming out to speak to us. So when you transitioned to CEO, how did you see your leadership style change, and was it rather quick or a gradual process?
Well, I was very fortunate to have been part of International Paper Company, which is a Fortune 50 company, and had been a senior executive for them for probably 10 years, before I took this role. So I had a lot of exposure to various things, everything from the board of directors to governance of a company and a lot of those things. So, and frankly, my experience in Europe, in particular in Russia, probably provided great knowledge in that as well. And so I was trained well to understand what a CEO needed to do and how to run a public company. What was more difficult in terms of transitioning my leadership was to really understand what were the things that only I could do, and that only I could do, because those were the things that I then had to focus on. And then that led to, I had to make sure the rest of the team was doing what they needed to do. Now that may sound simple, but as a CEO, there are some things that only the CEO can do. And so you need to figure that out relatively quickly, because then that determines how you balance your work and the things you get involved. What are some of those things? Well, I'm the chairman of our board of directors. Well, there's only one chairman, and I'm the only one who can do that. I have to meet with investors, myself and our CFO. I'm the only one who can do that. And so it's figuring out what are the things that only you can do, and then figuring out and making sure that the rest of the team is doing all the other stuff. And one of the things that I've learned is critically important. It's all about the people you surround yourself with. You don't do anything alone, and it's about having a great leadership team.
I know a lot of companies now are talking about corporate social responsibility and how they can integrate it into their business model. I was wondering if Veritiv is doing anything of this sort like that, some sort of social good campaigns or anything like that.
Yeah, so we, in the last 12 to 18 months, launched 2 initiatives, and we didn't do it right away because we couldn't do everything right away. So we launched 2 initiatives. One has to do with the external environment, our communities. And so we launched Veritiv Connect, and we're supporting and sponsoring what we call healthy living. But let me characterize what that means to us. We partnered with Red Cross and do things like, for example, just in the past, with the hurricanes in the past month, our employees donated $30,000 to the Red Cross in the course of a couple of days, and the company matched half of that. And so we launched our efforts around healthy living. And you think about people in areas where the hurricane came through, they need help, right? We also donate products under that venue too, because some of the products that we have, people need. Simple things like hand wipes, to keep bacteria from whatever when they're in those kinds of environments. The other aspect that we support is education-based. I have a very strong view, as does many in the company, that education is the basis of creating economic wealth, and wealth just being something as simple as what I describe as being able to take care of yourself. And so we partnered with Junior Achievement on that venue. And then we also launched the One Veritiv Fund. The One Veritiv Fund is it's donations made by Veritiv employees for Veritiv employees. And so we find that very powerful too, because if you have employees that, for example, like these recent hurricanes, we had some employees where they can't get back into their homes and they need help. And so these are donations made by our own employees that we give back to our employees that have need. So, thank you.
So we can take one last question. Okay, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe two questions then. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I'd like to know how you came up with the name Veritiv, and I see it's green, but otherwise I don't understand it.
That's great. That's a very interesting question. We had a lot of debate as a senior leadership team on the name. So we chose not to go with either of the other names for a couple of reasons. Each of the other names were connected to the history of the company, which wasn't bad in and of itself, except that the history of the company was connected with paper distribution. That's how the history of both companies created, 20, 30 years ago. And so we didn't want the connection with just paper distribution. We wanted a broader view and create our own future. And so we worked with a marketing firm out of New York, a branding firm. And Veritiv comes from bringing together two words. One is the Latin version of veritas, verify, trust, building trust and verifying, so veri. And our head of communications could probably explain this better than me. And then TIV, actively solving our customers' problems. And so the whole concept around the name is that you can trust us to be actively engaged with you to solve customer problems. And we picked green because it's the color of money. Does that... One last question.
My question is about your time in Europe. So what was some of the most surprising or interesting challenges that you encountered and that you did not anticipate when you were in that leadership position in Europe? And how important it is for kind of the young generation to have international experience as they kind of go through their careers?
So let me answer the last question first. How important is it to have international experience? It depends on what you want to do with your career. If you want to work in a large organization that has international operations, then maybe that's important. If you want to have a role like mine at some point, that could be important, may not be important. It depends on what kind of company you're managing and leading. So the answer to the second question is it depends. And it also depends on your desires in terms of whether you want to go through that experience. It's a challenging experience. Traveling abroad is way different than living abroad. So back to the first part of your question, what were some of the challenges? Simple things. You don't speak the language. You go into a grocery store and you can't tell the difference between yogurt and sour cream. Your first shopping experience might be 3 or 4 hours long if you're doing it alone. That's one of the more simple things. Let's talk about the business environment. These cultures are very, very different. You need to recognize and understand the culture. one of the things that I realized very early on is that everything I said was being translated. And so your communication skills were really important. And you could no longer tell jokes because they don't have meaning, right? And so you have to speak simplistically because you need to recognize that what you're saying, they're transmitting in a second or third language to get meaning to them. So communication is critically important. Recognizing the differences of culture and how to engage with people is critically important. And recognize that the way you're geared isn't necessarily what's going to work. And I'll use Russia as an example. What an interesting example. They're all over the news. So we, at that time, when I was part of International Paper, we put together a joint venture in Russia, and it was a 50-50 joint venture. And it was the largest joint venture outside of oil and gas, and it still exists today, which is also remarkable, and had their 10-year anniversary just last week. And it's been a very successful joint venture. What I learned through that process of negotiating, and then I was the lead director on the board of directors of the company for the first 2 years of operation. So it took us 2 years to negotiate the deal, and then I spent 2 years as the lead director. And understanding the culture, and what I learned is that you cannot run a Russian business the same way you run a US business. Even though culturally, I believe in collaboration and working across a matrix, that would never work in Russia. It's more of a command and control structure in order to be successful. And I think it's very important. So you need to understand those dynamics to be successful. Also recognize how do you win. Oftentimes people think, that it's always about money. But in that experience, what I learned, it wasn't about money, it was about power. Who had the power? And you get respect through power. And so those are the kinds of things that were very meaningful learnings for me in terms of how to operate and manage different types of companies and cultures and how to engage with people in a different way.
So let's give another round of applause to Ms. Laschinger.
Thank you. Well, listen, let me just say good luck with your venture. This is a great journey that you've embarked upon. The mere fact that you took time to invest in your education is very meaningful and an important choice. So good luck with everything you're doing. Thank you for your time today.